At 0700 hours on October 4th, 1943, Colonel Hubert Zemke stood on the concrete apron at RAF Haleworth, watching ground crews refuel 52 Republic P-47 Thunderbolts preparing for a deep penetration bomber escort into Germany. He was 29 years old, with 6 months of combat behind him and 4 confirmed aerial victories. Intelligence reported that the Luftwaffe would launch nearly 180 Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s to defend the industrial targets scheduled for attack that morning. Every pilot climbing into a cockpit understood the odds. The P-47 Thunderbolt weighed 7 tons empty. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The German Focke-Wulf 190 weighed less than 4. In a turning engagement, physics decided the outcome. The lighter fighter turned tighter. The heavier one died. Zemke's 56th Fighter Group had already lost 11 aircraft in its first 4 months of combat, 4 pilots killed, 7 taken prisoner. German pilots nicknamed the Thunderbolt the Jug, short for Juggernaut, a flying tank that couldn't dogfight. American bomber crews saw it for themselves. When Focke-Wulfs attacked, the Thunderbolts couldn't stay with them in sustained turns. Luftwaffe pilots broke away vertically, confident the heavy American fighters wouldn't follow. They were correct. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. On June 26, 1943, Zemke's group clashed with Jageschwader 26 over France. Experienced German pilots flew literal circles around the P-47s. 5 Thunderbolts were shot down. 4 American pilots were killed. Captain Robert Johnson barely returned home, his aircraft shredded by fire. His Thunderbolt had absorbed more than 200 cannon hits and still flew, but it hadn't won the fight. The math was unforgiving. A Focke-Wulf 190 could outturn a P-47 every time. At 15,000 feet, the German fighter completed a full 360-degree turn in 22 seconds. The Thunderbolt required 28.6. In combat, 6 seconds meant death. 8th Air Force commanders watched the struggle and began planning to replace the P-47 with a new P-51 Mustang, lighter, faster, superior in level flight, and with longer range. The Thunderbolt program appeared. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. 5 additional fighter groups were slated to convert to Mustangs before the end of 1943. But Zemke had spent 2 years testing the P-47 before the war. He understood something the Germans did not. The Thunderbolt couldn't turn, but it could dive. Its massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine produced 2,000 horsepower. The thick wings and heavy airframe remained stable at speeds that would tear a Focke-Wulf apart. In a vertical dive, nothing in the Luftwaffe could catch a Thunderbolt. Zemke stopped fighting the war the way the enemy expected. He developed new tactics built around the P-47's true strengths: altitude advantage, diving attacks, hit-and-run strikes. Never turn with the enemy. Dive through the formation. Use speed and momentum. Zoom back to altitude. Then attack again. The 56th Fighter Group drilled these tactics throughout the summer of 1943, dive bombing practice on ground targets, high-speed gunnery passes, strict energy control. Every pilot learned to fight in 3 dimensions to treat altitude like currency, trade height for speed, speed for position, never get slow, never try to turn. By September, Zemke's pilots were ready. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. But 8th Air Force bomber losses were climbing fast. On September 17th, missions against targets in France cost 8 B-17s. German fighters struck before American escorts could arrive. The bombing campaign was faltering. October 4th would be different. Zemke intended to put his new tactics to a full combat test. 52 P-47s, all attacking from altitude, all using speed instead of turning, all relying on the mathematics he had worked out. If you want to see how Zemke's diving tactics worked against the Luftwaffe, hit the like button. It helps share more stories like this. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Zemke. The mission briefing that morning included one detail that changed everything. The bomber stream would cruise at 22,000 feet. Zemke placed his Thunderbolts at 30,000, 8,000 feet above the bombers. 8,000 feet of stored energy, waiting to be converted into speed. By noon, the 56th Fighter Group would either prove the P-47 could win or watch their bombers burn. German radar stations picked up the American formation as it crossed the Dutch coast at 0930 hours. Luftwaffe controllers scrambled Jägerschwader 1 and Jägerschwader 26 to intercept. 73 Focke-Wulf 190s climbed toward the bomber stream. German pilots expected what they always saw: American fighters flying close escort alongside the B-17s. Easy targets forced to maneuver slowly to stay with the bombers. But Zemke's 56th wasn't escorting. They were hunting 8,000 feet above. At 0952, Zemke spotted the German formation assembling 15 miles ahead of the bombers at 18,000 feet. The Focke-Wulfs were climbing into position. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Standard Luftwaffe doctrine: gain altitude advantage, dive through the bombers, use speed to escape before the escorts could react. Zemke rolled his P-47 into a 70-degree dive. 51 Thunderbolts followed. 7 tons of aircraft and ammunition surged downward toward terminal velocity as the massive propellers clawed into the thin air. The double Wasp engine thundered at full military power. Airspeed needles swept past 300 miles per hour, past 350, past 400. The German fighters never looked up. Their attention was fixed on the bombers below. They didn't see 52 P-47s diving out of the sun at 450 miles per hour until Zemke's opening burst of .50 caliber fire tore through a Focke-Wulf's cockpit. The German pilot never recovered from his climb. What followed lasted 90 seconds. 51 more Thunderbolts punched through the German formation at speeds the Focke-Wulfs could not match. Each P-47 carried 8 Browning M2 machine guns, each firing 800 rounds per minute. Together, the group threw nearly 68,000 rounds into the sky every 60 seconds. German pilots tried to brake, tried to turn, tried to dive away, but the physics were against them. A Focke-Wulf at 400 miles per hour could not pull out of a dive as quickly as the heavier P-47. The Thunderbolt's thick wings and massive structure absorbed the G-forces. German pilots blacked out trying to match the Americans, or their aircraft failed under the stress. Zemke's wingman, Lieutenant Walter Cook, watched a Focke-Wulf attempt to dive away from his attack. The German pilot shoved the stick forward, pushing his fighter nearly vertical. Cook stayed with him. At 500 miles per hour, the Focke-Wulf's right wing bent backward and tore free. The wreckage spiraled down toward the Dutch farmland. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The remaining Thunderbolts did not dogfight. They never tried to turn with the Germans. Each pilot made a single high-speed pass fire, dive through, then use remaining speed to climb back to altitude for another strike. Zemke had worked out the numbers precisely. The Thunderbolt's engine could recover 8,000 feet in 4 minutes. 4 minutes, then they could dive again. The German formation disintegrated. Pilots who moments earlier had been lining up on B-17s were now fighting to survive. They couldn't climb fast enough to escape the diving Thunderbolts. They couldn't dive fast enough to outrun them. They couldn't turn because the P-47s never committed to turning battles. By 1003 hours, 11 minutes after the first attack, the sky above the bomber stream was clear of German fighters. The Focke-Wulfs that survived fled east toward their bases. Not a single German fighter reached the bombers. 0 bombers lost. Zemke's group performed at altitude and resumed the escort. The bombers struck their targets without interference. On the return leg, additional Luftwaffe formations appeared in the distance, but none closed to engage. The 56th Fighter Group landed at Haleworth between 1300 and 1400 hours. Ground crews tallied ammunition usage. Gun cameras were collected for film processing. Intelligence officers began debriefing the pilots. The early reports sounded unreal. 21 confirmed enemy fighters destroyed, 8 probable, 16 damaged. 0 American aircraft lost. 0 pilots wounded. 8th Air Force Headquarters demanded proof. Investigators interviewed every pilot individually and reviewed all available gun camera footage. They cross-checked the claims against radar plots and radio intercepts. Every victory was confirmed. October 4th, 1943 was real. But it was only one mission, one day. The Luftwaffe still fielded hundreds of fighters, and the strategic bombing campaign had another 18 months to run. Could Zemke's tactics work consistently? Could other fighter groups master them? Could the P-47 truly win the air war over Europe? 3 weeks later, the 56th Fighter Group would answer those questions in a way that shook the Luftwaffe. October 1943 became the 56th's proving ground. The 8th Air Force scheduled maximum effort bomber missions when never weather allowed: Bremen, Munster, Wilhelmshaven, Düren, industrial targets deep inside Germany. Each mission drew a massive Luftwaffe response. On October 8th, escorting a raid on Bremen, the group intercepted 40 Messerschmitt 109s forming to attack the bomber stream. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Same tactics: high-altitude positioning, diving attacks. 6 German fighters destroyed. 0 American losses. October 10th brought a major raid. 60 Focke-Wulfs attempted to break through to the bombers. Zemke's pilots hit them in 3 successive diving passes. 9 confirmed kills, 2 probables. The bombers completed the mission without losing a single aircraft to fighter attack. October 14th was different. The 8th Air Force launched the second Schweinfurt raid. 291 B-17s targeted ball-bearing factories vital to German war production. The Luftwaffe committed everything it had, over 300 fighters from every available Jeschwader. Both sides knew this would be decisive. Zemke was not flying that day. He was at 8th Air Force headquarters receiving the British Distinguished Flying Cross. His deputy, Lieutenant Colonel David Schilling, led the 56th into combat. Schilling followed Zemke's doctrine precisely: stay high, wait for the Germans to commit, then dive through at maximum speed. But the scale of the battle overwhelmed every escort group. There were too many German fighters, too few American escorts. The numbers didn't work. 68 B-17s were shot down. 680 American airmen were killed or captured in a single afternoon. Schweinfurt became the worst single-day loss in 8th Air Force history. The 56th Fighter Group claimed 16 German fighters destroyed, more than any other escort unit that day. But it wasn't enough. The bombers kept burning. The strategic bombing campaign appeared finished. American losses were unsustainable. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. German fighter production was rising. The daylight offensive was failing. On October 20th, for days after Schweinfurt, 8th Air Force commanders debated suspending deep penetration raids until long-range P-51 Mustangs could arrive in sufficient numbers. Some argued the P-47 had proven inadequate for escort duty: too short-ranged, too heavy, too limited. Then the weather cleared over northern Germany. The 8th Air Force launched another maximum effort mission, Düren railway yards. The 56th Fighter Group lifted off from Hailworth at 0830 hours. Zemke was back in command. The mission followed the new doctrine precisely. The group climbed to 32,000 feet, 10,000 feet above the bomber stream. German fighters rose to intercept the B-17s. Zemke counted 73 contacts, Jägerschwader 26 and elements of Jägerschwader 3, some of the Luftwaffe's most experienced units. The German formation was led by Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland. He had 55 confirmed victories and 7 years of combat experience, having fought in Spain, Poland, France, and Russia. He knew every fighter tactic the Luftwaffe taught. Galland positioned his group for a textbook bounce attack on the bombers. His fighters held the altitude advantage over the B-17s. His formation was flawless. They began their dive at 10:45. Zemke was already diving. His 52 Thunderbolts held 2,000 feet more altitude than the German formation. They struck Galland's group from above and behind at 470 miles per hour. The German pilots never saw them. The fight lasted 7 minutes. 17 German fighters were destroyed in that span. Galland's Focke-Wulf took multiple .50 caliber hits to the engine and cockpit. The aircraft entered an uncontrolled spin at 23,000 feet. Major Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland did not survive. The Luftwaffe had lost one of its most seasoned fighter leaders in a battle shorter than the time it takes to boil water. By October 31st, the 56th Fighter Group had flown 9 major combat missions in a single month. Their confirmed tally for October stood at 39 German aircraft destroyed. The unit that couldn't dogfight had become the highest-scoring fighter group in the 8th Air Force. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The Germans took notice. Luftwaffe intelligence began tracking American fighter tactics and identified a new threat. They called it the Americanish tactic, the American diving tactic. And they had no answer for it. In November 1943, Luftwaffe Jagerschwader commanders held emergency conferences across occupied Europe. The Americans had changed something fundamental. German pilots reported P-47s attacking from impossible altitudes at speeds their aircraft could not match. Traditional intercept methods no longer worked. For 4 years, Luftwaffe Doctrine had ruled the skies: gain altitude, position above the enemy, dive through with superior speed. It had destroyed Polish, French, British, and Soviet aircraft by the thousands. Now the Americans were executing it better. Major Gunther Roll commanded Jagerschwader 11. With 275 confirmed victories, he was one of Germany's most successful fighter aces. He studied the 56th Fighter Group's tactics and identified the problem. The P-47 pilots weren't escorting bombers, they were hunting fighters. They ignored the B-17s and went after Luftwaffe formations before they could attack. German fighter controllers tried to adapt. They sent intercepts at different altitudes, some high, some low, some from the flanks, hoping to force the American escorts to split up, divide their attention, and open gaps for bomber attacks. It didn't work. Zemke arranged his squadrons in vertical layers. One squadron at 30,000 feet, a second at 28,000, a third at 26,000. If the Germans came in high, the top squadron dove. If they came in low, the bottom squadron dove. The middle squadron covered both. Every P-47 maintained enough altitude to convert instantly into attack speed. On November 5th, escorting a mission to Münster, Jagerschwader 1 attempted a coordinated strike. 30 Focke-Wulfs approached the bombers from multiple directions at once. Zemke's group intercepted all 3 formations before they reached firing range. 14 German fighters were destroyed. The bombers lost 0 aircraft to fighter attack. Flak claimed 2 B-17s. Fighters claimed none. The Luftwaffe began avoiding airspace where the 56th Fighter Group operated. German controllers monitored radio traffic and learned Zemke's call signs. When his group was detected, fighters were redirected to other sectors. Missing an attack was preferable to losing experienced pilots. By late November, 8th Air Force Headquarters understood what was happening. Other P-47 groups were not seeing the same results. The 4th Fighter Group, the 78th, the 352nd, solid units with capable pilots, none matched the 56th's kill ratios. 8th Air Force Commander General Ira Eaker ordered Zemke to brief all P-47 groups on his tactics. December 8, 1943. Kings Cliff Airfield. Every fighter group commander in the 8th Air Force attended. Zemke spent 4 hours explaining the mathematics. The P-47 couldn't turn. Accept it. Don't dogfight. Use altitude. Convert height into speed. Hit fast. Disengage fast. Climb back up. Repeat. Never get slow. Never turn with the enemy. Think vertically, not horizontally. Some commanders resisted. They had trained their pilots in traditional dogfighting, turning battles, close-in maneuvering. Zemke was telling them that everything they knew was wrong for the Thunderbolt. The aircraft couldn't meet existing fighter doctrine, so the doctrine had to change. Colonel Don Blakesley commanded the 4th Fighter Group, scheduled to convert to P-51 Mustangs in January 1944. He asked Zemke if the diving tactics would work for the Mustang as well. Zemke answered yes, every fighter benefited from altitude and high-speed attacks, but the P-47 depended on them. The Mustang had choices. The Thunderbolt did not. On December 22nd, the 56th Fighter Group escorted bombers to Osnabrück. Heavy overcast. Poor visibility. German fighters attacked from inside the cloud layers. The ambush tactics erased the American altitude advantage. 8 P-47s were damaged. 1 pilot was killed, 2 captured. The mission exposed the limits of the Thunderbolt. When weather forced low-altitude operations, its advantages vanished. But clear skies dominated northern Europe through January and February 1944, ideal conditions for high-altitude combat. The strategic bombing campaign accelerated. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Big week was coming. 6 consecutive days of maximum effort raids against German aircraft factories. Every available bomber. Every available escort. The largest air battle in history. The 56th Fighter Group would fly all 6 days. Their assignments included a target no American escort had ever reached, Berlin. 500 miles into enemy territory, beyond the combat radius of every fighter in the inventory. Except someone had figured out how to extend the P-47's range by 18%. And that someone was about to prove the Thunderbolt could escort bombers all the way to Hitler's doorstep. In February 1944, Republic aviation engineers delivered modified external fuel tanks to RAF Hailworth. Each tank held 150 gallons. The P-47's internal capacity was 305 gallons. With externals, total fuel rose to 605 gallons. Combat radius increased from 230 miles to 425. Berlin was now within reach. The problem was weight. A fully fueled P-47 with external tanks weighed 9 tons at takeoff. It needed every foot of Hailworth's runway to get airborne. Once in the air, the fuel load crippled climb performance. German fighters could intercept during the vulnerable climb phase, when American fighters were heavy and slow. Zemke calculated the solution. Take off fully fueled. Climb gradually over England. Burn the external tanks first. Drop them before crossing into enemy airspace. By the time German fighters appeared, the P-47s would be at combat weight with full internal fuel remaining. The math worked, but only with perfect timing. Drop too early, and Berlin would be out of reach. Drop too late, and the aircraft would be too heavy to fight. Zemke set the drop point over Holland, 200 miles from base. The fighters would cross the Dutch coast at combat weight, carrying enough internal fuel for 2 hours of combat operations. February 20th. Big week began. The 8th Air Force launched 941 bombers against German aircraft factories. The 56th Fighter Group lifted off at 0900 hours, 54 P-47s, each carrying full fuel and ammunition. Target, Leipzig, 400 miles inside Germany. The group climbed to 30,000 feet over the North Sea, external tanks feeding fuel to the engines during the ascent. Over Holland, all 54 pilots triggered their releases at the same moment. 108 external tanks fell toward the Dutch countryside. The P-47s were now at combat weight. Altitude, 30,000 feet. Speed, 280 miles per hour. Internal fuel sufficient for 4 hours of flight. German radar picked up the formation. Luftwaffe controllers scrambled every available fighter, Jägerschwader 3, Jägerschwader 11, Jägerschwader 26. 190 German fighters climbed to intercept the bomber stream. The 56th Fighter Group moved ahead of the bombers as planned. Zemke spotted the German formations assembling at 28,000 feet, 50 miles ahead. The P-47's dove. The same tactics that had worked in October: high-speed attacks, single-firing passes, zoom climbs back to altitude. But this mission was different. The Luftwaffe had adapted. German fighters no longer massed into single formations. They dispersed into small groups, 4 aircraft sections, hard to detect, harder to intercept all at once. When the P-47s hit one section, 2 more attacked from different angles. The battle spread across 40 miles of German airspace. Zemke's group could not maintain tight formation while engaging so many small units. The fight broke apart into dozens of individual combats. 47 pilots found themselves alone, outnumbered, facing multiple opponents at once. Lieutenant Robert Johnson engaged 3 Messerschmitt 109s over Brunswick. He destroyed one and damaged another. The third slipped onto his tail. Johnson dove to escape. The Messerschmitt followed. Both aircraft accelerated past 450 miles per hour. Johnson pulled out at 8,000 feet. The German pilot blacked out under the G-forces and crashed. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Across the sky, the pattern repeated. German pilots tried to turn with the P-47s. Physics killed them. American pilots climbed away. Mathematics saved them. At combat speed, the Thunderbolt's power-to-weight advantage exceeded anything the Luftwaffe could match. The bomber stream reached Leipzig at 1,230 hours. German flak batteries opened up, 88mm guns, 105mm guns. The sky filled with black bursts. 21 B-17s were shot down over the target. Flak, not fighters. The Luftwaffe never broke through. The 56th Fighter Group escorted the bombers back to England, landing at Hailworth at 1,540 hours. Total mission time, 6 hours and 40 minutes. 18 German fighters confirmed destroyed. 2 P-47s lost. Both pilots survived and evaded capture. Big Week continued for 5 more days. Brunswick, Regensburg, Augsburg, Gotha, Schweinfurt again. And on March 6, 1944, the mission everyone said was impossible. Berlin, March 6, 1944. 0700 hours. RAF Hailworth. Zemke briefed his pilots for the deepest penetration mission ever attempted by American fighters, Berlin, 510 miles from the English coast. The German capital had never been reached by escort fighters. Every previous daylight raid on Berlin had cost dozens of bombers to unopposed Luftwaffe attacks. The mission plan was ambitious. 660 B-17s would strike industrial targets across the city. 397 fortresses targeted the VKF ball-bearing plant at Erkner. 263 attacked the Daimler-Benz engine factory. If the bombers survived, German tank and aircraft production would be crippled. The 8th Air Force assigned 8 fighter groups to escort the mission. 673 German fighters rose to defend Berlin. The capital had never fallen to daylight bombing. It would not fall easily today. The 56th Fighter Group crossed into Berlin airspace at 1,122 hours, the first American fighters over the city. Zemke spotted German formations at 11:24. More than 70 contacts at 28,000 feet, 5 miles ahead of the bomber stream. Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s mixed together. The Luftwaffe had committed everything. The P-47s dove from 33,000 feet. Zemke led the attack himself. His flight struck the German formation at 460 miles per hour. The opening pass destroyed 6 fighters in 11 seconds. The formation shattered. Zemke's wingmen pressed through. 3 more Focke-Wulfs fell. The sky over Berlin became a 3-dimensional battlefield. P-47s dove from altitude. German fighters clawed upward toward the bombers. The forces collided at 25,000 feet. .50 caliber tracers and 20mm cannon fire crossed the airspace. Wreckage fell toward the city below. Zemke destroyed a Focke-Wulf near the Mughal Sea, his second victory of the day. His wingmen shot down a Messerschmitt 109. The fight drifted west as German pilots tried to regroup. The P-47 stayed with them, diving attacks, zoom climbs, no turning fights. The same tactics that had worked in October worked over Berlin. The bomber stream reached the targets at 1,150 hours. Berlin's flak defenses opened fire. 2,000 anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with black explosions. 69 B-17s were damaged. 11 were shot down, but not a single bomber fell to German fighters during the bomb run. The escorts kept the Luftwaffe away from the formations. By 12:30, the fighting ended. The bombers turned west. German fighters broke off. Fuel exhaustion forced both sides to disengage. The 56th Fighter Group reformed and headed home, landing at Hailworth at 1,440 hours. Total mission time, 6 hours and 10 minutes, the longest fighter mission flown by any American unit to that point. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Intelligence tallied the results. 18 German fighters confirmed destroyed over Berlin. 4 probables. 9 damaged. 2 P-47s lost, 1 pilot recovered, 1 captured. But the numbers told only part of the story. American fighters had reached Berlin. They had protected the bombers. They had won the air battle over the German capital. The mission every expert had called impossible was now complete. ZMI was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for leading the Berlin escort. The citation praised his tactical innovation, his leadership under fire, and his role in transforming the P-47 from a liability into the 8th Air Force's most successful fighter. 3 months later, the 56th Fighter Group would accomplish something even more extraordinary. May 1944. Allied forces prepared for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy. D-Day demanded total air superiority over the landing beaches. Luftwaffe fighters could not be allowed to reach the invasion fleet, strafe the beaches, or interfere with airborne operations. That responsibility fell to the fighter groups of the 8th Air Force. The 56th Fighter Group moved to Boxted Airfield in Essex, closer to the French coast and better positioned for round-trip missions to Normandy. Their orders were direct: sweep ahead of the bombers, destroyed German fighters before they could reach the invasion zones and maintained constant patrols over the channel. From May 8 through June 5, the group flew 32 missions in 29 days. Fighter sweeps, bomber escort, armed reconnaissance, ground attack. The pace surpassed anything seen in 1943. Pilots flew 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day. Everyone was exhausted. Everyone kept flying. June 6th, D-Day. The 56th launched at 0430 hours. The first wave, 51 P-47s, swept the French coast ahead of the invasion fleet. Their mission: destroy any German aircraft attempting to reach the beaches. Not a single Luftwaffe fighter would break through. The sky over Normandy at dawn was empty of German aircraft. The Luftwaffe had withdrawn from coastal airfields days earlier. Allied intelligence knew they were positioning for counterattacks once the invasion began. The 56th headed inland toward those airfields. If the Germans wouldn't come to them, they would go to the Germans. At 0620 hours, Zemke spotted aircraft taking off from an airfield near Ivry. Focke-Wulf 190s scrambling to meet the invasion. The P-47s attacked during the takeoff sequence. German fighters were most vulnerable then. Heavy, slow, unable to maneuver. The strike destroyed 9 Focke-Wulfs on the ground. 4 more were shot down during takeoff. The remaining aircraft broke off and scattered. Not one reached the invasion beaches. The 56th returned to Bogstad at 0915 hours. They refueled, rearmed, and launched again at 1100. The second mission of D-Day. Armed reconnaissance over the Falaise area. The group intercepted German fighter bombers attempting to reach Allied positions. Junkers 88s, Focke-Wulf 190 fighter bombers, Messerschmitt 110 night fighters pressed into daylight service. The Luftwaffe threw everything it had into stopping the invasion. By sunset on June 6th, the 56th Fighter Group had flown 97 individual sorties. They claimed 23 German aircraft destroyed, 15 on the ground, 8 in air, with 0 American losses. The invasion succeeded in part because German fighters never reached the beaches in meaningful numbers. But June 6th was only one day. The campaign continued through June, July, and August. The 56th flew constant missions supporting the breakout from Normandy. They strafed German convoys, destroyed fuel depots, attacked rail yards. The P-47's 8.50 caliber machine guns proved devastating against ground targets. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds tore through truck engines, fuel tanks, and locomotives. On August 12, 1944, Zemke received orders to transfer to the 479th Fighter Group, a struggling unit equipped with P-38 Lightnings and converting to P-51 Mustangs. 8th Air Force needed him to rebuild them. His time with the 56th was over. Lieutenant Colonel David Schilling assumed command. Schilling had flown with the group since January 1943. He fully understood Zemke's tactics. The transition was seamless. The group's performance never declined. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Under Schilling, the 56th continued operations through the end of 1944 and into 1945. The Battle of the Bulge, the crossing of the Rhine, the final push into Germany. The group flew its last combat mission on April 21, 1945, 18 days before Germany surrendered. When the Air Force Historical Research Agency compiled the final statistics, the record of the 56th Fighter Group was undeniable. 2 years of combat operations, 447 missions flown, 19,391 sorties, 64,032 hours of combat flight time, 677.5 German aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat, the highest total of any fighter group in the 8th Air Force. 100 more victories than the second-place group. The only fighter group in the European theater to fly the same aircraft type from first mission to last. The P-47 Thunderbolt, an aircraft German pilots mocked as too heavy for combat, had destroyed more Luftwaffe fighters than any other American fighter. Not because the airframe changed, because the tactics changed. Zemke's diving attacks, his altitude discipline, his refusal to dogfight, his mathematical approach to aerial combat. These innovations transformed the strategic bombing campaign. They made D-Day possible. They won the air war over Europe. And it all began with a single realization. The P-47 couldn't turn, so stop trying to make it turn. Zemke transferred to the 479th Fighter Group on August 12, 1944. His new unit flew P-51 Mustangs. Different aircraft, same tactics, altitude advantage, diving attacks, speed over maneuverability. He scored 2.5 additional victories with the 479th, bringing his total to 17 3/4 confirmed kills. October 30th, 1944. Zemke led a mission over Germany in deteriorating weather and severe turbulence. At 18,000 feet, his P-51's wings tore away. He bailed out and evaded capture for 3 days. German troops captured him on November 2nd. He spent the remainder of the war at Stalag Luft I as the senior Allied officer, responsible for 9,000 prisoners. But the 56th Fighter Group no longer needed him. His tactics had become doctrine. Every pilot understood the mathematics. Every replacement learned the system. The unit's success continued under Schilling's command through the final 7 months of the war. The group produced 39 fighter aces, more than any other 8th Air Force fighter group. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski scored 28 victories with a 56th, the highest total of any American pilot in the European theater. Captain Robert Johnson finished with 27. Colonel David Schilling claimed 22.5. Major Walker Mahurin recorded 20 3/4. These weren't lucky pilots. They were disciplined tacticians who understood physics. They knew their aircraft's strengths and limitations. They refused to fight the enemy's fight. They forced the Luftwaffe to fight theirs, and the Luftwaffe lost. By April 1945, other P-47 groups across the 8th Air Force had adopted variations of Zemke's tactics. The 78th Fighter Group, the 352nd, the 353rd. Combined, P-47 Thunderbolt units destroyed more than 2,000 German aircraft in air-to-air combat. The supposedly obsolete fighter became the most successful American aircraft in the European theater. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The strategic bombing campaign succeeded because fighters like the P-47 made it succeed. Bomber losses fell from nearly 20% per mission in 1943 to less than 2% by 1945. German industrial production collapsed. Ball bearing plants, aircraft factories, oil refineries, tank works, destroyed by bombers protected by escort fighters that finally worked. Zemke survived the war and returned to the United States in May 1945. He remained in the Air Force until 1966, retiring as a full colonel. He never received a general's star, despite leading one of the most successful fighter groups in American history. Some said his outspoken criticism of senior officers cost him promotion. Others believe the Air Force favored leaders who did not challenge doctrine. Regardless of rank, Zemke changed warfare. His mathematical approach to aerial combat influenced fighter tactics for the next 3 decades. Vietnam-era F-4 Phantom pilots used energy management principles drawn directly from his P-47 doctrine: altitude advantage, speed advantage, boom and zoom. The principles remain valid even as aircraft speeds doubled and tripled. The 56th Fighter Group disbanded in October 1945, reformed in 1946, and served through the Cold War. They flew F-86 Sabres on air defense missions, converted to F-100 Super Sabres, then to F-4 Phantoms. Today, the unit trains F-16 pilots at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona. The Wolf Pack continues. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit the like button. Every like tells YouTube to share this story with more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories of pilots and commanders who saved lives through tactics, mathematics, and discipline. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. The United States? The United Kingdom? Canada? Australia? Our community spans the world. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Zemke and the 56th Fighter Group don't fade into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.